Welcome to the house of pain.
The Tahoe's sitting at a 3.5 drop, and today I'll show you step by step on how to lower your Tahoe. And when I say that, I mean from start to finish, including some alignment tips.
I'm gonna make you boys strong.
That looks like the perfect stance, and my Tahoe is a 2-wheel drive, but if yours is 4-wheel drive, it'll also work. I'm currently using a set of 22-inch by 9.5-inch wheels, and the tire size is a 265/40 R22, but you can still use your original factory rims and tires. Before I start lowering the Tahoe, I'll take some quick measurements, and it does seem a bit higher in the rear since it has no third row seat. I also removed the spare tire, and it didn't come with a trailer hitch. On the driver's side, it's sitting at 36 inches right now. On the rear of the Tahoe, right now it's sitting a little bit over 38.5, so pretty close to 38 3/4. From the top of the tire to the fender, right now it's a little bit over 8 inches, and that's with the stock tire size on the 22-inch rim, which is the 285/45/22. On the rear passenger side by the exhaust, it's actually at 38 3/4. The front passenger side is sitting right at 36 inches. If you're looking to drop your Tahoe 4 inches or more on the rear, what you want to do first is go ahead and cut out the factory bump stop bracket or the free travel mod. That way it doesn't bottom out into your axle. And if you're doing like a 3-inch drop, you don't really have to do it, but I would definitely recommend it for more than 4 inches, 4 all the way to like 6 or 7 inches.
I think it is going to be a sunny day today. Oh, no, I meant raining. I meant rain.
And you already know, since I decided to drop the Tahoe, it just had to start raining, so I'm gonna have to wait a little bit and take off the rear tires and all that right now. Here's a better look at the free travel mod from the passenger side. And I actually took my Tahoe to a friend's shop so he can help me cut it out and make it a little bit quicker on the video. It's just a lot of metal cutting, so nothing too hard. You just want to be careful on the driver's side, because on there you're gonna have the gas tank, but here in the passengers it's pretty simple. You just want to try to not cut your frame, and we did go ahead and spray with a little bit of spray paint so it's not gonna rust out. And now there's definitely a lot of space so it doesn't bottom out on the axle.
Flashback. End of flashback.
Over on the driver's side, you can see the gas tank is right here. So that bracket is going to be real close to it, and you want to be very careful and take your time. I would probably do it in 2 separate pieces, the outer edge and then the inside. And you can actually install or put some type of metal to block it off. You can see right here they kind of nicked a little bit on the original springs, but I don't really mind because I'm going to be taking these off. But you definitely want no sparks or anything cutting on your gas tank, so just take your time right there or take it somewhere else where they can help you cut it out. But yeah, that's how the free travel mod looks on the driver and passenger side. Once you have the free travel mod, if you want to go any lower, like 6 or 7 inches, you do have to notch another piece below the truck. I'll go ahead and show you right here. The other part you want to notch out is this upper cross member. You can kind of see it got cut out from the factory. All this is closed up and it just has this small opening, but pretty much the pan hard bar usually hits up here, and that's if you're going real low, like a 6-inch 7-inch drop in the rear. My Yukon had a 7-inch drop, and you can see that the pan hard bar was smacking up on top here and it was kind of indented, so I never went ahead and cut it. But now on the Tahoe I do want to go lower, so I went ahead and just had it cut right there.
Flashback.
You can see where the pan hard bar was hitting in that back section of the frame.
End of flashback.
Today I'm only dropping the rear of the Tahoe 5 inches, so this won't really be needed, but I do want to have it in case I want to go lower in the future. I do want to thank DJM Suspension for being part of the Tahoe build and sponsoring this kit today. So you guys want to go ahead and check them out at DJMSuspension.com. They have many parts for your trucks and SUV if you want to go ahead and lower it. And I haven't really opened the boxes yet, but this should be here for the rear, the shocks, and on the bottom it's going to be the front suspension. So today we'll go ahead and drop the Tahoe using all DJM suspension. For the rear, we have the 5-inch lowering springs, which come in blue. The lowering shocks, these are the DJM 1800 series, and they have their little sleeves down here, so we'll have to insert them on the bottom and top of the shock. They don't come with them pre-installed. On the right side, I have their rear hardware kit, which is the RK2000. The instructions are here. And what it is just some shorter end links so we can relocate the sway bar, the relocation bracket for the lower control arm on the Tahoe. That way we get that good ride quality. All the hardware. I'm not sure if these end links are a new style because you can see they're all closed. Usually they have some openings so that we can thread in the new fittings right here for the grease. And I'll just go ahead and install them like that today. I'll contact DJM and just make sure that everything is good with these. I have the rear end as low as it'll go, but the spring still won't pop out, so I'll have to release the end links as well as the bottom of the shocks, and then I can go from there, pop out the springs, and try to do the relocation bracket for the lower control arms. To remove the bottom of the end link, we'll have a 19mm wrench on the right side and 18mm socket on the left. All the parts we're unbolting will be the same for the driver and passenger side. All right, that's off. For now, I'll just leave my sway bar here, but we'll have to relocate it towards the right. That way it doesn't bottom out or hit on the frame with the shorter end links. And I'll just go ahead and loosen up the bolts for the shocks, which are 21mm. I think the harder part is gonna be relocating the lower control arm. That's why I just wanna get it loosened up first, and then I can worry about the top bolts for the shocks and end links. They didn't feel that tight actually. They're probably getting loose already because it's pretty old. These are kind of nice because they ratchet. Yeah, this side's kind of loose as well. What I like to do sometimes is have some extra jack stands on the bottom, just in case the differential wants to go too low. I don't want it to completely drop. And also, since I don't have no straps to pull the differential forward when I'm adjusting the lower control arm brackets, this usually helps out. And these springs are pretty tall, so you gotta go pretty low as well. There you can see it's loose and it's still not touching at the bottom, so I'm gonna go lower. The two isolators. The springs are pretty tight because these isolators, but if you're having a hard time, you can use the pry bar and that'll help out. All right, finally. There's a good size comparison versus the DJM 5-inch coils and the stock springs. They're pretty much like double the size, but down here are the stock isolators. These were the ones that were giving me a hard time taking that spring out, but combined they're about 1/2 inch. If you remove these, you'll get a little bit more drop, but today I'm just gonna go ahead and keep these. All right, the top isolator. That actually looks pretty cool right there. Springs are in. At this point, I could actually bolt up the rear end links and shocks and put it all back together. The Tahoe would be dropped 5 inches, but it wouldn't be safe or correct because the lower control arms would be off at a different angle, as well as your drive shaft into the transmission, so you can risk damaging stuff. And also, these springs would just pop out of place because the end links are just too big. So let's go ahead and complete the rest of it and do it the right way. To unbolt the rear of the lower control arm, there's going to be two 21mm bolts. On the inside is the head of the bolt, that 21mm, and towards the brakes is going to be the 21mm nut. The bracket will go just like this with the flat side on the left. It should just slide right up in here, and use 2 small bolts for the top and 1 on the bottom. And we'll just probably reuse, well actually it comes with a new bolt for the lower control arm. I loosened up the bolt on the right side so I can adjust this, but you can see that it still doesn't reach. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up the other side and then try to adjust it without the ratchet strap. To unbolt the rear of the driver's side control arm, I'll have to remove this 13mm bolt that is right up here holding these 2 brake lines. You can see the bolt right there because it gets in the way of this one just popping out. So there should be enough clearance now. Since I don't have a ratchet strap, what I'm doing is lifting the differential from the front to give it a higher pinion angle and making it go towards the control arm so that it can line up a little bit better. You can see it's getting closer. So I'll go ahead and lift it up a little bit more. And it is resting on the bottom jack stands right now through the sway bar link. That was actually a little bit too much, so let me back it up. That's pretty close right there. Probably have to adjust it right now. It's a little offset. I like to put my bolts with the threads facing into the truck so that it gives me more clearance around the brakes and tires. But if it's not lining up, you can use like a flathead or an extension to get it in place. It'll usually move, so it's not like super tight. I'm not sure if you can see that kind of moves right there. That looks good. Now I can put the washer and nut on the other side. It might seem a little hard to get the bolt to line up properly on both ends, but all you want to do is take your time and just play with the jack and the differential to get different angles. And you can also wiggle this area and it'll usually just line up. You can see right now it's not lining up correctly, but if I kind of pull right here, because it's already kind of loose, you know, with all the bolts. There you can see, pretty much just wiggle it around and get it to where it's gonna let you go in without damaging the threads on the bolt. There it is. A better look at the relocation bracket for the lower control arm. You can see that it has the 2 bolts on top and the nuts are inside. You want to get them as tight as you can by hand, so don't over tighten them. These are lock nuts right here, and on the back side there's going to be another bolt right there with the nut, but there is 2 holes because these brackets are interchangeable. They'll work on the driver's side or passengers. And on the bottom there you can see the aftermarket lock nut as well. And I'm using their hardware for the bottom control arm because this bolt is going to be a little bit longer versus the stock one. The driver's side is exactly the same. You can see the 2 bolts on top and that bottom one right in the back. So don't worry about this empty hole at the bottom. Don't forget to tighten up the bracket for the emergency brake. I tighten up the bolts on the control arms, but I'll do the final torque specs once I have the truck on the ground. You can just see the nuts on the inside. And I raised up the differential so that I can line up my springs and make sure they're not gonna come out of place. You can see they're locked up in there. As well as this one, you can kind of hear it. So now I'll go ahead and unbolt the rest of the end links and top of the shock. This plastic might get in the way of removing the nut and bolt for the top shock, but usually you can do it without cutting it. And what I'll do is go ahead and use a wrench on this side and a ratchet on the back side. There you can see the bolt, but there's actually a lot of space, so you can use an extension and also to torque it down. I went ahead and torqued the top of the bolts to 70 foot-pounds, and it also helped out to kind of move this plastic around. It's very flexible, so you can see that it's just a tab that's kind of holding it in place there. So if you pull it up, it gives you a lot of clearance. And now I'll go ahead and cut off this right here and try to align it at the bottom and torque it down to 70 foot-pounds. I'll cut it from the top side and it'll start moving down. There it is. That actually kind of lined up too perfect, but it doesn't always happen like that. Usually you have to adjust it a little bit. Now that I reversed all the bolts, I have way more clearance on this side and on the top side, because as you can see right here, it was already kind of rubbing and I still hadn't lowered the truck. So eventually I might have to trim out this plastics if I have to, and also back here, depending on the tire size and the size of the rim. Now I can go ahead and take off the 18mm bolt and nut for the top end links, because we will be reusing these for the new ones down here, which they only come with the bottom side. And I went ahead and contacted DJM. They did say this is a new design, so if yours doesn't have the hole to thread in the new part, don't worry about it. It'll be just like mine's. And on the shocks, I went ahead and used the factory bolts for the top and bottom. On the lower control arm, I did go ahead and use their new hardware, because it does need a longer bolt right there. So once I get these on here, we'll go ahead and relocate the sway bar. These end links do go in a specific way, so just make sure they go lined up exactly like this, with a small offset on the left side for the driver's side, and the larger offset is for the passenger side. And I'll go ahead and leave my bolts just like this with the nut on the inside, so that I can have this side with more clearance. My tabs were a bit close, so I just used my end link right here to pry it a little bit open, and that seemed to help out. Or you can use some type of pry bar. All right, that looks good. It's easier if you're using two hands. For the torque specs, I found different ones. I'll go ahead and do mine at 35 foot-pounds. If I need any more, I'll adjust them later. Now we can go ahead and relocate our sway bar a little bit offset to the right. And we're just gonna go ahead and remove the two bolts holding this bracket, which are 10mm bolts. You can see them better there. And we're gonna go ahead and use that factory hole in the back. And we're gonna go ahead and put some new nuts and bolts through there and drill a hole for the front one. Here's a better look from the bottom. You can see the hole much better. But this bolt is pretty much just moving to this side. It's already there. It's not threaded, so that's why we're gonna put the new nut and bolt. And on the front side is where we're gonna go ahead and drill it with a drill bit, put the nut and bolt, and it should be good to go. I'll probably just put some grease on the bar to make it slide a little bit easier, since we're taking it apart. The new hardware bolts are bigger than the factory ones. These are gonna be 14mm. I'll add some grease right here to make it easier to slide. That should be good. It's already hitting right there, so it's just center out. I'll add some more on this side as well. That looks good right there. I got the rear nut and bolt, but I did go ahead and do the nut on the bottom side. It just made it a lot easier coming from the top. And on the front, I got the self-tapping screw making the hole right there. So I'm gonna take it off and make it wider. And the end links are already in. I just gotta tighten them up to 35 foot-pounds. All right, I got both of them in there, and I did go ahead and manage to break one of my drill bits. But now it's all complete, and you can see both of them have the lock nuts on the bottom side. All right, guys, you see I have the wheels on already. It's actually been a little bit over a week since I've been working on the rear drop, and we had left off with the end links. So let's go ahead and quickly recap over the whole drop. To relocate the sway bar, all we had to do was unbolt the driver's side and slide the bar towards the right. So don't worry about unbolting the passengers. And on the end links, whenever we bolted up the new bracket or the new bolts, we used the original hole in the backside, and in the front we ended up using a drill bit to make our own. But I did have to put the nuts and bolts in reversed order, because from the factory they go from the bottom up, and you can see here that I have the nut coming down. That just made it a lot easier, especially on the back one, because there's not a lot of space. So whenever you're doing this piece, you want to go on the outside of the truck and come from the top and just drop it down. You'll see it, and it'll be much easier versus trying to stick the bolt from the bottom up. And other than that, I mean, it was pretty simple. This one has way more space because you can see this area here is open, but the backside was the one that's a bit harder. Here's a better look at the driver's side end link. On the top, I am using the original hardware from the Tahoe, and on the bottom, I'm using DJM's hardware with the locking nut on the inside next to the sway bar. But I went ahead and tightened up mine to 35 foot-pounds, but the original torque spec for the Tahoe is 48 foot-pounds. This felt good, and also if you read on the manual, it tells you not to over tighten them, so you can just make sure and check them out there. You don't want them too tight. I haven't heard any squeaking from the end links, even though these don't have the fittings for the grease, but I do remember that whenever I installed the original ones on my Yukon, I had broken one of them, and for the remainder of the drop, whenever I had it on there, it never really squeaked. So I think they should be good, and that's most likely why they went ahead and did a revision on their end links and found out they don't really need them. But now, since we relocated them, you can see how much space you have here from the bracket. It has a lot of clearance, so it's not going to bottom out, and the ride quality is good. I'll show you a better close-up at the passenger's end link, but check out the exhaust here. It still has enough clearance. It's clearing the panhard bar and your frame, so don't worry about cutting it or anything like that with this 5-inch drop. Maybe if you're going anything lower like 6 or 7 inch, you might have to modify it. Like on my Yukon, I had it cut back there and dumped before the axle. This end link is a bit tighter, but it does clear everything. Here's the bottom side. You can see it's away from the frame of the panhard bar. Here's the space on the shock side and the frame. You can kind of see my finger. You can see the clearance much better from the bottom. The only one that's really close is this hanger right here holding the parking brake wire, and there's a bracket. It's kind of touching on the bolt, but it's been pretty good. I've been driving it and checking it out. I might have to move it later. You can see it's slightly touching, but if I lift it up, it looks good. So it's slightly rubbing on there. I'll just loosen the hanger a bit to give me a little bit more clearance. There it is. Now that looks much better. There's a lot more space. It was a pretty tight fit, so that was the only one that I was kind of worried about. There's a better angle, and on this end link, the sway bar goes on the right side. On the relocation bracket for the rear control arms, it helped out to have the sway bar on the 2 jack stands and then control the pinion with the front end of the jack so that it can reach the lower control arm, because remember, it kind of pulls it back and you want to pull it forward. So that helped out a lot. And also, when I did go ahead and bolt these brackets on, I started with the bottom bolt first so that it can line up, and then I went ahead and tightened up the top bolts on the sides. The lower control arm bolts get torqued down to 89 foot-pounds. With those relocation brackets, the lower control arm is now leveled. If not, it would have been kind of slanted up and the angle would have been off. That's why you do want to go ahead and use that so that your truck will be correct back to the factory specs. I'm only using lowering shocks, and that's why you see mine's at a slight angle. But if you want them to be a little bit more vertical, you can purchase the shock extenders and bring them out a little bit more. It's not going to give you any additional drop. The drop comes from the springs, but you will get them a little bit more vertical, which usually is a better working angle for the shocks. Even though I'm not running any shock extenders, these shocks have a real good ride quality, and the only ones I like using on my personal trucks is gonna be the DJM shocks like I have here, or the Beltec Street Performance, how I had on my Yukon. That's the Beltecs on the Yukon. From the side, you can see they're a bit more vertical with the shock extenders, and they're actually pretty similar to the DJM. If there's any difference, it might be that they're slightly softer, but overall they're exactly the same. And I just feel like the DJMs are a bit firmer, which is not a bad thing, because sometimes if you're carrying a lot of weight or like a big system, you might want a firmer shock because you don't want it to bottom out accidentally. But overall, they're both great shocks. I did use the original hardware for the shocks, and I torqued them down to 70 foot-pounds. Right now the rear tire is rubbing a bit on the inside, but I'll go ahead and show you. And these are 22 by 9.5 with a plus 38 millimeter offset. The tires are 285/45 R22, which comes stock in some of the trucks, and it's just a 32-inch diameter. On the back side, you can see a bit of the rubbing right there, and on the front. But let me go ahead and lower the axle a bit. There's a better look at the rubbing. You can see it's a lot, and it's because this section is kind of extruded, so it kind of touches on the tire. It really doesn't affect it, it's just plastic. You can either trim it out or let the tire kind of beat into it. I'll probably cut it later. For now, it's okay. And on the rear of the tire, it also kind of rubs a lot right there. But that's why I like to flip the bolts on top of the shock so that it doesn't kind of touch out here, because you can kind of see how close it is. Or if not, the stud would actually kind of eat into your tire. You don't want that, but the plastic is fine. And this actually brings another good point, which I'll show you on the passenger side. You can probably already see it, but if you guys notice, there's not that much rubbing on the front end of the tire as well as on the rear versus the driver's side. The reason this happens is whenever you lower the Tahoe, the axle wants to shift a little bit more towards the passengers, and that's why you get a little bit more rubbing on the driver's side. But you won't really ever notice it unless you're running real big wheels and a bigger drop, more like a 6-7 inch drop. Then the wheels can tuck up more and they'll kind of rub on your fenders. But in this case, it'll be okay. And if you really want to fix it, you can go ahead and change out your panhard bar to a adjustable one so that you can recenter your axle. There's different brand adjustable panhard bars, and you can see where you adjust the nut to recenter the axle. The one I had on my Yukon was by Spone Performance, and if you guys want to check it out, I'll have a link down below in the description as well. On the lowering springs, just make sure they're seated properly because you don't want them to pop out of place. And if you are thinking of going lower than a 5-inch drop, you also want to go ahead and cut out this section so that the panhard bar is not going to bottom out and damage your frame. So now that we're done with this, we can go ahead and lower the jack and check out the stance. There she is right there, looking much better than stock. But if you guys are liking this content so far, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more like this. Something you'll notice after dropping the rear of the Tahoe is that the rear wheels like to roll a little bit forward and they get closer to the fender. So this gap is going to be slightly smaller versus on the back side. You can see it's a little bit bigger. And it usually isn't a problem unless you're running bigger wheels like 28s or maybe 26s with bigger tires. And all you want to do to fix this is go ahead and change out the lower control arms, kind of like the panhard bar, to one that's adjustable, and then you can recenter the axle and you won't have any issues with rubbing or making it look kind of weird right there. Besides that, you don't have to change out the upper control arms unless you really want to do the maintenance and have it all upgraded. Back at the Yukon, you can see my adjustable lower control arms, and again, they're by Spone Performance, but there are other brands you can use as well. You can essentially see how the wheel gets all centered out, and you have a lot of space in the front as well as on the rear. And this is with the 6-inch drop on the Yukon and the stock tire size 265/70 R17. And I'll go ahead and take some quick measurements before I go ahead and work on the front end. I actually have been driving it for a little bit over a week, and right now it does have a full tank of gas. So let's take some quick measurements. So right here in the front, it's looking like around just slightly over the 36 inches, almost 36 1/4. So pretty close to what it was in the beginning. On the rear driver's side, it's sitting right at 36 inches and a half. So it definitely dropped those 5 inches in the rear. It's more like 5 1/4. And I'll go ahead and measure the gap here again. It's around like 3.5 inches or a little bit less. I know it's not like super accurate, but I just wanted to give you an idea right there. Yeah, it's got that mini squat going on right there, but I kind of like it. And let's go ahead and check out the passenger side now. The bumper's looking pretty low. On my passenger side, it's pretty much sitting right at 33.5 as well. It might be slightly taller, but it's very close. Up here in the front by the passengers, it's slightly taller. Not that much. You can see it's like right at 36 3/8, a little bit higher than the 36 1/4. So they're all pretty evened out, even though that, you know, some of these Tahoes may not be all leveled. But in my case, I mean, it's sitting pretty close. I haven't messed with the torsion keys or anything like that. My Tahoe didn't have any bump stops in the rear, and also we did go ahead and cut the bracket to do the free travel mod. So right now I don't have any bump stops. I could add some lower profile ones underneath the axle. I'll go ahead and show you. It's at ride height right now. You can see the upper control arm on top, and on the bottom of the axle it has this nice flat spot where you can drill a hole and put a low profile bump stop. But also some people like to use the original hole back here and thread it on there. I've never had mine's bottom out, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave it blank, but maybe in the future I might just add one. Yeah, that mini squat from the rear looks kind of cool. I'm kind of liking it, so I'm not really thinking about driving it like this too long, so that's why I want to get some shots from back here and show you guys before I go ahead and level it out. Before I lower the front, I'll go ahead and add some WD-40 to the torsion bars in the front and rear. Here's the parts to lower the front of the Tahoe, and again, thanks to DJM Suspension for sponsoring this kit. We have the lower control arms, which are going to drop at 3 inches in the front, and they are size specific. This one is the passenger side, and then you can see here is the driver one. So you don't want to mix them up. They come with the new ball joints, the hardware to use it on the bottom shock because it's a different style. They also have the grease fittings in the bag so that we can put them on the new ball joints as well as on the side of the control arms. And they do go with the torsion bar, so we'll have to remove that to go ahead and install this control arm. We also have their front lowering shocks, which are the 1315 model, and they come with all the bushings and hardware to install them. You can see on the bottom it's different versus the original one, and we have to put in the sleeve that comes in the packaging. When you install the fittings, make sure not to over tighten them because they will break. That feels good right there. You don't want to overdo it because they'll for sure break. We have 2 more on the bottom of the control arm. And these are 8mm. All right, that looks good. Once they're in the truck, I'll add the grease on them. Let's go ahead and put on the sleeves for the shock. There is different ones. You can see this one doesn't fit that bolt, so we won't be using this one. This is the same thing. These should be the right ones. That's good, and there. So I'll go ahead and add a bit of grease on here so that it can make it a bit easier. And this is the same for the rear shocks as well. We won't be using these. First, I'll start by removing the torsion keys so that I can get it out of the way and free the control arm. But I'm gonna go ahead and measure the bolts right now so that I can kind of get it as close as possible to the stock ride height without affecting the camber too much. Here's my driver's side key, and over there you can see the passengers. The bolt is sticking out a little bit more on that one, but this one is pretty close up in here, so let's go ahead and start measuring it. It's almost all the way in. You can kind of see it's like a little bit less than ½ inch, so I'll try to kind of stay in that area. All right, we're at the passenger side, and there's my factory bolt. You can see it's sticking out way more, so let's go ahead and measure this one. Between the threads it says 5/8. and right at the bolt head 7/8, so almost 1 inch. To remove the torsion bar keys, we will need a torsion bar removal tool, and I'll be using a 1 inch socket on this one to unthread it or thread it. And to actually remove the bolt holding the torsion key, it's going to be an 18mm bolt. So I just have a 18mm deep socket, but you can use the standard size. Also, you can use a hand ratchet or drill. They both work. This will just make it a little bit quicker. First, we're going to take off the 18mm bolt completely off, and then we can use the tool to raise up the key, and then we can take off this little retainer clip or metal piece. I added some WD-40 because it's giving me a hard time to come off. Most likely there's some rust on the threads. I got the big ratchet and I'm just doing it little by little because I don't want to break this bolt. You see it just kind of moves very slightly. So you just want to take your time and try not to damage it or break it. One turn at a time is just starting to loosen up. It still got some threads. Let's see if it's loose enough for the drill now. Alright. I was just kind of worried in the beginning because I didn't want to break it with the drill. There's the 18mm bolt. And it was a bit of a workout to get this one out, but you can see that the retainer is still in place. It's kind of dark in here, but we have to use a tool now to remove it, and that way the key will come right out. But first, I'll go on the passenger side and remove the 18mm bolt as well, just in case it's stubborn as on the driver's side. Let's see how this one does. I did add some WD-40, but I think it's also because the bolt was sticking out further out versus the driver's side. It's hard to get a good view down here, but once you go ahead and touch on the top side, you'll feel an empty hole. That's where the tool will lock in from the top with the tab. And on the bottom of the torsion key, you'll notice the dimple right here, which is where you want to put that other side of the threaded nut or bolt, not on the right side, because this is the one that we're going to take off right now. This is the dimple that'll insert into the top hole, and you want to put this part under the key. Alright, I got it on there, so it's not moving anymore. I got it locked in from the top, and on the bottom side you can see where I'm grabbing onto that dimple, and the threaded part is empty. We're just going to tighten it to where that retainer can come loose, and try not to stick your fingers inside there. You can see it's already loose right there, so as long as it comes out, then you're good. There it is. So we'll go ahead and do this on the passenger side as well. And now we can just release the tension on here. We're gonna back it out. There, this is loose already. The top hole for the passenger side is closer to the exhaust, so don't mix it up with the other hole here on the left side. There's another one. So it's a bit slanted, and you can see that it kind of angles up to the other side of the key right here with the dimple. And we're not trying to go into the threaded side because this is the one we're removing. All right, this is the tricky part here. We have to remove the key from the torsion bar. So you can hammer it down or wiggle it. It all kind of helps out as long as you get it out. And there's also a hole here where you can try to kind of hammer it with a tool so the bar can go forward because it doesn't have any room to go back. The bar runs all the way up to the lower control arm. That's why we got to remove it so we can replace this piece. I didn't get to film it, but this one actually came out real easy. I think it's that WD-40 that helped out. I just kind of pulled it forward and it just slid out from the back. I got the key over here. But let me see if I can catch the passenger side. I'll try the same way, pulling it from here. There it is. The key just dropped. So I didn't have to hammer it. I was just grabbing the bar from here and there and just trying to, you know, jam it to the front because it was kind of loose already with that WD-40. Not too bad. There's the key right there. Yeah. We're just gonna put it back here. So I'll just let it sit in here while I do the front end. Let's go ahead and unbolt the top of the shocks. It's a 14mm nut. I'm gonna go ahead and go from the top side because it's a little bit easier versus down here. You wanna hold the bottom of the shock with a vice grip. If not, it's gonna go ahead and spin on you. There it is. They're pretty worn out. Since I'm replacing the lower control arm and the shock, I won't waste my time by unbolting this and just take it out in one piece. Now we can remove the end links and it'll be the same as the shocks with the vice grip on top and a 14mm bolt on the bottom. There you can see that 14mm. And we're just gonna grab the top with the vice grip just like the shock. And today I'll be reusing my original end links. They're a bit worn out, but they'll work for now. And it'll be the same on the passenger side. All right, now we can remove the lower ball joint nut, which is a 24mm. The impact just makes it easier, but you can do it by hand. And we'll go ahead and put this back on. Since I don't have the tool to remove the lower ball joint, I'll try to knock it loose with a hammer or a mallet. I finally got the lower ball joint from the driver's side loose. You can see it there. And all I had to do was raise up the lower control arm with the jack and just hammered on the bottom of the nut. That freed it. It is a lot of work, so I do prefer using the tool to remove the ball joint. But I didn't have it this time, so I'll go ahead and try that again on the passenger side. All right. This is how I'll tackle the passenger side. I'm gonna go ahead and jack up on the lower control arm so I can lift it up and get the ball joint out of here. That way I can go ahead and unbolt the lower control arm from the front and back, because you can see I still have the bolt on there. Pull the torsion bar forward so it can give me some more moving room, and that should just kind of let everything fall down with the shock included. All right, now that we have the lower ball joint free, we can remove the nuts and bolts from the lower control arm. In the front side of it, back here, there's gonna be a 18mm bolt head, and on the back side is being held on by a 24mm nut. The same on the back. You can see right there is a 18mm, and the nut is just right on the back of it. From the front side, you'll see this hole, and there you can see the bolt head. And there is the other 18mm bolt head. there's the lock washer and nut. I'll move the torsion bar a bit forward just to give it some more space. Alright guys, the lower control arm is now out, and I did manage to remove it with the shock in place. I just had to move the torsion bar a little bit to give me some space and just wiggle everything out of there. But I'll go ahead and do this on the passenger side. It'll be exactly the same. I'm just holding the rotor with my jack, and I've already removed this bolt, and it's pretty much all just falling out now. I'm just taking this last bolt out, and I'll go ahead and try to pry it with a pry tool. But you do want to be careful if you are doing something like this, because they are very heavy. That's all one piece there, and I'll go ahead and take off the torsion bar, put it back in here, and go ahead and install the new control arm. You also want to go ahead and slide the torsion bar the same way it came back out, with the back piece in the rear. And also we can kind of clean up this area so that the new control arm can slide in easier. The torsion bar is heavy, but you can see the hole here where you have to slide it right through. And back here you can see the hole where you'll put the torsion key. I like to add the grease on the bushings just to make it a little bit easier once I install it. Don't forget that the longer bolt goes on the back side of the control arm where the torsion bar goes, and the shorter one is the one that goes in the front. I'll install my control arm from the back first because it is pretty heavy, but some people like to do the ball joint and then do the last two bolts. Whichever works out best for you. This is how I'm starting to put the control arm on. I went ahead and inserted the torsion bar, and it's just standing on this pad, but I'm gonna go ahead and lift it up so that I can run up the bolts, and then after I can do my ball joint in the front. To help me line it up, I went ahead and put in a flathead screwdriver. Meanwhile, I hit this one with the mallet, and that usually helps out, and then I can actually put in the original bolts. Sometimes an extension can help you line it up as well. Alright, at this point I have the front bolt in the control arm. On the back side it's still not aligned. I took off the flathead and just kind of moved the torsion bar forward so it can give me some more space, because it makes it a bit tricky, and it's a good idea to install it now. So I have the torsion bar key ready, and once I get all this aligned I can push it in with the key in place, and then I can finally do the lower ball joint. It is a bit hard to film it, but on the left side I have the flathead, and it helps me line up the right side so I can insert the bolt. I lifted up the rotor with the jack, and that way I can also lift up the control arm because it was having a hard time going in, but the bolt went through, and now we can go ahead and put the nuts and bolts. Don't forget the lock washer as well. I'll leave them loose for now, and we can go ahead and work on the ball joint. Right now I'm just holding the control arm with a jack stand, and I'm gonna pick up the hub with the rotor in place to slide it under the ball joint. that actually went pretty smooth right there. You can see we got a little bit of thread coming out, so we'll put the castle nut so it's not gonna start coming apart. And I'll probably lift up this area so I can get some more threads in there because I don't want to cross thread it. That should be good for now. Just make sure not to cross thread it because you don't want to be messing around with these bolts. Let's go ahead and do the end links now. And I'll jack up the control arm to get the top piece in because the threads are not popping out that much. That's better. These go at 89 inch-pounds, so try not to over tighten them. I'm gonna go ahead and start off with the drill. All right, now that I have all these in, I'll go ahead and install the torsion key and then I can work on the shock. The torsion bar is already halfway, so I should be able to hold on the key. I'm just holding it with an extension because sometimes when you're hitting it from the front, it'll pop the key right back out. All right, so it's in now and we can put it back in reverse with the torsion tool. All right, I got the bolt back in and it's pretty close to where I got it out from the factory. There's the driver's side. This one's just a little bit harder to film. It just started to rain, but the torsion key is in and now we can go ahead and move on to the shocks. The new bolt and nut are 19 millimeter and we're gonna go ahead and torque them down to 59 foot-pounds. We got the top hardware for the shock. I'll go ahead and jack up the control arm so I can reach the top threads and put on the locking nut. If you can, you want to go ahead and torque it down to 15 foot-pounds. They really don't take that much force, so I like to do it with an open wrench. As long as you're careful with the bushings, you don't want to overdo it and squeeze them too much. That looks pretty good right there. I'm about to torque down the lower control arms and the ball joint, so I have it jacked up to right about right height, since it is hard to do it with the wheels on the ground. And the bottom bolts here will be torqued up to 129 foot-pounds. On the lower ball joint, it's gonna be 74 foot-pounds, and this is gonna be a 22 millimeter nut. You just want to line up the castle nut to the hole for the cotter pin. We can just bend these out the way. But we can't forget about adding grease to the fittings on the bushings. On the control arms, you can see the fittings much better through the bottom. This one's a little bit closer to the frame, but you should still have some space. And the one for the ball joint is going to be a little bit easier to reach. Alright guys, let's go ahead and recap over the front drop. So we're using DJM's 3-inch control arms, which drop the front end 3 inches. And they do come with a brand new ball joint, so that's good on maintenance. And using the torsion bar. We also changed out the shocks to their lowering shocks, the 13-15. And we didn't mess with the end links. I just left the stock ones, but you can't replace them. The size is okay, so if you need to replace them, you can go ahead and do that. I just left mine alone. Even though we didn't do anything with the upper control arm, you do want to go ahead and align your truck. And I do want to do this later also, so I can replace the upper ball joint since everything is pretty much new now, besides the end links. Last time I did do the tie rods. But something else you might have noticed is that I don't have any bump stops in the front or on the rear of the Tahoe. And that's because it came like that. But you do want to go ahead and get shorter ones or cut them. I might just do that later on. For now, I'll leave it alone. If I wanted to, I could have gone lower with the torsion keys since I do have some drop keys here. All they do is drop it another 2 inches or 3 inches, but I'm not really ready to do that right now, so I kind of went ahead and just stuck with the 3-inch drop. Later, I might do maybe spindles. That'll drop it 2 inches, or you can do torsion keys. But I decided not to do that today because that would require changing out the upper control arms because you'll get a lot of negative camber. If I have any issues with my alignment, most likely I'll try to adjust it myself because usually I try to take it to shops and then they don't want to mess with it because it's lower. They say it's a little bit harder. I don't see the difference, but I'm just going to go ahead and do that myself. I've always kind of done it like that. That's also why last time that I had steering wheel shake, I went ahead and changed out my parts and adjusted my camber by myself because they'll usually say something like that. And I just went ahead and moved the front tires to the rear. You can kind of see them over here. They're a bit worn out because I was getting positive camber. Here's the other one. It was kind of worn out. So the front ones are a little bit better. But once I get the drop in and drive it around, I'll adjust it. If I have to get new tires, then I will. We're ready to put the wheels back on so we can check the new stance on the Tahoe. Let's take it around the corner to see how it drives and also if it settles. I'm not taking it too far, I just want to see how it drives around here. The steering wheel seems off. You can see how much play it has. It's kind of going to the side. I went ahead and parked it and the steering wheel straight, so let's go ahead and check it out from the outside. There it is, guys. It's looking much better, but it still looks higher in the front, so let's go ahead and measure it. When we first started, it was about 36 inches to the fender, and right now it's sitting at about almost 34 inches and a half. So it's not the full complete 3-inch drop. That means we have to adjust the torsion keys. Let's also check out on the passengers. But also, you can kind of see here that it's got a lot of toe out. It kind of came to the outer edge, so we're gonna have to straighten it out, and that's probably why my steering wheel was kind of crooked. It looks worse in the passenger side. It's much higher in the front. There's definitely more toe out, and also this one has a lot of positive camber. The tires kind of sticking out through the top, so that means we're gonna have to go ahead and lower the torsion keys and adjust it. But let's take a quick measurement. It was the same as the front driver's 36, and right now it's close to 35, so it didn't drop that much. And I'll go ahead and adjust the torsion key And also the tie rods, I'm gonna loosen them up so I can get that toe back into alignment. To get my toe adjustment pretty close to spec, I like to use the levels with the measuring tapes and also the clamps just to make it a bit quicker. You can see the tie rod right there. I already loosened the jam nuts, so I'm gonna make the tie rod a little bit shorter to bring the tire in, and the same on the driver's side. And this is with the weight of the truck on. It doesn't really take that much effort. You can see when I'm moving it, it just moves. So you just wanna adjust it to where it gives you a good alignment. I'm just going up to shorten it. I'm using a 13 millimeter. You can see it's already starting to go in, so I'm gonna go a little bit more, and I will have to go into the back for the torsion key to drop it down a little bit and get that camber in, because it's got too much positive. I got it almost in, and you can see a big difference here in the driver. I haven't touched it, it's sticking out a lot. I'll do a bit on the drivers too. I may have actually gone a little bit too far in, but that's a good start because I do want to go ahead and lower the rear torsion key, and that'll probably give me a little bit more toe out, and I'll have to play with it. What I'll do is start cranking the passenger side torsion key first, because this side will also affect the drivers. So if this one gets a little bit lower, that one will also drop. It's a good idea to lift up the truck whenever you're adjusting the torsion key, but since I'm going lower, it should be okay. I'm gonna go ahead and try it out. If it's too hard, I'll go ahead and jack it up. You don't want to do too much, just like small increments if you're going lower. And if you are trying to lift it up, you do want to put it on jack stands and a jack. That's on my passenger side now. And that's on the driver's side now. First, I'm checking on the ground to make sure it's leveled. And you can see right here that it is. So now I can go ahead and start working on the tires and getting them set up. The truck is sitting pretty low, so I want to have it as low as possible, but I do want to have it centered. And you can see here the level is nice and straight. And now we can go ahead and do the same on the passenger side. Alright, this side is ready here as well. You can see the level in the center is nice and straight, as well as the ones on the sides. You can see those little bubbles on top for the rear and the front. So just make sure to have them as straight as possible. The more leveled it is and even to the driver's side, then the more accurate your measurements will be. I got me 2 smaller clamps just to hold on to the measuring tapes, and that should be fine for right now. I'm not trying to make it all perfect. I just want to get a decent reading so that I don't wear out my tires. The Tahoe is rear wheel drive, so I do want to have a slight amount of toe in. And here in the backside, let's see the measurement. It looks like 76, close to 3/8, a little bit less. And on the front side, we have 76 and 1/8. So that's actually pretty good, but I do want to go ahead and open it up a little bit more because I don't want like too much toe in or toe out. But that's actually a decent reading right there. And let's go ahead and just slightly open it up a little bit more. After some adjustments, I'm removing the measuring tapes, and I'll go ahead and move the steering wheel, but let me take these clamps off the passenger side as well, because I don't want them to get caught up with the tire when it moves. And just make sure to have clearance for these bars to move around, which should be good on the Tahoe because it is pretty low. All right, let's see. All right, let's get this one back centered again. That should be good. Let's go ahead and check out the new measurements. On the back of the tire, I have 76 and 3/8. And right here in the front side, we now have 76 and 1/4. So it's just 1/8 of toe in the front, which is exactly what I want. And you guys let me know what you think down below in the comments. But I think this is a very nice and simple way of doing it to get it close to alignment. I know this video is a bit long, but if you've made it this far, I do appreciate it. And I also want to make sure I help you out. So what I did was go ahead and go into all data and pull up all the original specs for the alignment on these trucks, which is a paid service what mechanics use. Here on the right side, I have the 99-02. So you can see all the specs: caster, camber, and toe. And there it is. So you can see that it's got the positive toe. On the left side, I also have the 03 to 06 models. But if you guys appreciate this and like this content, don't forget to like and share. And there it is for you. Let's measure the driver's side from the bottom of the floor all the way to the top of the fender. You can see it's right at 33 inches. And I'll do the passengers the same way, trying to get it as level as I can here. All right, there it is. So 33 inches right at the fender from the bottom. The driver rear is right at 33 5/8. And this is with almost a full tank of gas because I have driven it a little bit, but it's pretty much full. The passenger rear, the same as the driver's, right at 33 5/8. All right, there it is, guys. So she's sitting at 3.5. The rear is a bit higher. It's at 33 inches and a half, and the front is sitting right at 33 inches. To get the full 3-inch drop in the front, I did have to adjust both of my torsion keys. But what I do like about the control arms is that I didn't get no negative camber, and it was also like maintenance since it has the new bushings, the ball joint, and on the tie rods, they kept the same angle, which is good because you don't want to have that bad angle on your tie rod. All I had to do was adjust them to fix that toe out, because you remember, guys, that the wheel was kind of sticking out, so I had to shorten it and bring them back into spec. I didn't have to mess with the upper control arms for the camber or caster. They stayed the same. All I did was just mess with the outer tie rods. If you want to get a better look at my alignment, just check it out right here. This is the driver's side, so it's sitting nice and straight, flush with the fender well. But I also like to do my own alignment because whenever I take it, they don't really ever leave it right, and it'll go to the sides. Also, I would just spend a lot of money, but you guys let me know what you think right here. There's my alignment. It's looking straight. With the front drop 3 inches, I'm not really getting any rubbing on this 32-inch diameter. You can see here on the sides, it's nice and dry. And also in the front end, it's not touching any of those parts. But if you notice back there, it kind of touched. Most likely it was whenever I was adjusting my torsion keys, because I did go ahead and go a little bit too low, and then I just went back up to where it was all leveled. But besides that, maybe later on I might just get me some thinner tires, or you know, something a little bit different. But I haven't heard any rubbing. The same on the passenger side. You can see it's nice and dry in the back, and on the top side there's really no rubbing because this one didn't go as low when I was adjusting it. Maybe a small mark right there in that corner, but in the front it's all dry, so no rubbing at all, which is good on this 32-inch diameter. It has enough space there so it doesn't rub at all. And there's the back side on the passenger side. It's got some space. You can put your fingers through it. It's already been over a month after my drop, and I'm satisfied with the alignment, so I'm gonna go ahead and change out the tires today to something a little bit different, maybe more low profile to give it a different look. It doesn't require it, but I just want to change it up a bit. Here's the last look of the Tahoe with the bigger tires. I was thinking of going with a bigger tire, but I ended up going with the 265/40 R22, and I'm really glad I did because I do like the profile. It's much sportier and it rides really good. It says City Tracks, but I think the brand is over here, which is a Land Spider tire. Yeah, the Tahoe's looking much nicer now with the 3.5-inch drop. But now that this is complete, we can go ahead and get back under the hood and continue working on all our wiring upgrades. But if this video helped you out or you like this content, don't forget to hit that like button down below, share, and I'll see you on the next one.